Hey, Lisa. The board will now come to order. Lisa, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coatar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Mohammed. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Present. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed. President Reed.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Rhodey. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Mohammed. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. 20 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Pastor Kathleen Wilder from Lafayette Park United Methodist Church. We are so blessed to have Pastor Wilder with us this morning and to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Good morning. Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for this day. And God, we give you thanks for all who have come before us, who have worked so hard for freedom, for justice, for equality, for all people, all of your children. And God, we give you thanks for those we honor today, for their work here and now, for equality and justice and freedom for all people. And God, as we begin to celebrate the weekend of Pride, we give you thanks that our city has been celebrating the gifts of all people who are created and unique, but we all carry your image within us. We give you thanks for the diversity within our community, and we pray that you equip us and continue to give us strength and courage to transform our city to be the hope of what a loving city can be for the world. Help us break down additional barriers. Help us make this city completely free, completely safe, completely just for all. We pray everything we do brings honor and glory to you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Let's give Pastor Wilder a big round of applause. Thank you for a great prayer today. We're going to suspend with our regular order of business to take up our courtesy resolutions calendar. Alderman from the 18th, come on. Yes, we're going to hold on the courtesy resolutions calendar for now. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guests today my good friend Dave Sweeney from Lewis Rice and Jane Duker. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th. Alderman from the 9th. Oh. Any further introduction? Alderman from the 14th.
Up today is my special honored guest, Demetrius Alfred from Firefighters Local 73.
Alderman from the 26th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guest today, Mr. Anthony Shaheed. Thank you.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have today as my special guest Fred Searcy from the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Alex Scharf from the Home Builders. I also have Gretchen and Ian, and they're with the Sahara Group.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to introduce as my special guest today up in the gallery, Miss Clark's class from Aspire Academy, along with Sydney Johnson, who's a candidate for the 76th District. I'd also like to introduce Sean Weller, aide to Congressman Clay, Leroy Grant, and Chris Pickle from AT&T.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest the license collector, Mavis Thomas, and Donna Booker, who is not here after 29 years. Thank you.
All right. Any further introductions? Any further introductions? We are also so blessed to have with us today Ollie Stewart, who served in numerous different roles in the 6th Ward, but has fought and continues to fight for fair rights for people of all races, colors, and genders, and also pushing for rights for seniors. Let's give her a big round of applause for all that she does. We also have with us Ms. Valerie Miller. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Miller. Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 18th, you're recognized on approval of the minute. Alderman from 13th.
I'm sorry, President, members of the board. I would like to have as my honored guests Jeff Hans and Samuel Adams from the Carpenters Union. Thank you.
Alderman from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, we're gathered here on June 22nd. On this day in 1932, the National League actually approved wearing numbers on uniforms. In 1963, little Stevie Wonder recorded Fingertips. Everybody say yeah. But today, June 22nd, is Ugliest Dog in the World Day. We have the poster child. The Alderman from the 23rd is here today as our poster child. Thank you.
Alderman from the 18th, would you like to proceed with the courtesy resolutions, or would you like to take up the approval of the minutes?
The minutes.
All right. You're recognized for approval of the minutes.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for approval of the June 8th and 15 minutes.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, entertain the second. Seconded by the Alderman from the 26th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
The report of city officials can be found in all the aldermen's mailboxes. From the office of the mayor, dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Loop East Community Improvement District. The appointment of Ms. Felicia Shaw, who resides in St. Louis County and whose term will expire on April 1st, 2020. The reappointment of Mr. John Marshall, who resides in the 28th Ward and whose term will expire on April 1st, 2022. The appointment of Ms. Cheryl Walker, who resides in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on April 1st, 2022. The appointment of Mr. Mont Levy, who resides in St. Louis County and whose term will expire on April 1st, 2020. The appointment of Ms. Andrea Purnell, who resides in St. Louis County and whose term will expire on April 1st, 2020. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Lyda Crewson, Mayor of City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 28th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Loop East Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adopt the mayor's appointments to the Loop East Community Improvement District.
Moved by the Alderman from the 28th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? Alderman, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Tell you what, let's give, I want to thank Mary Reese for standing in today with the absence of our clerk and attorney. So let's give her a round of applause and some encouragement. Great.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the 212 South Grand Community Improvement District. The appointment of Miss Amy Beckman, who's property owner representative in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2021. The appointment of Miss Clarissa M. Douglas, who is a property owner representative in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2021. The appointment of Miss Carly Frazier, who is a property owner representative in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2021. The appointment of Miss Tristan Campbell, who is a property representative in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2019. The appointment of Miss Ashley C. Henderson, who is the property owner representative in the 19th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2019. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Lyda Crewson, Mayor of City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the 212 South Grand Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move to approve the mayor's appointments.
It's moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We spend with our regular order of business to take up our courtesy resolutions calendar. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for our courtesy resolutions calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the courtesy resolution calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Alderman from the 18th, please approach the dais.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Mohammed. Alderman Moore. I don't know if he can come up and have a seat. He can come up and have a seat. Should I go? Should I go ahead? We're trying to see if he wants to come up. Okay then. Not yet. Or boy, or Brandon. You can come and have a seat. Is that going? There's Marlene. So did, hey, baby. Yeah. Alderwoman Davis, can you join us? You okay? Okay. Okay. Mr. President, members of the board, today marks 153 years since the ending of the Civil War in the United States. According to abolitionist Frederick Douglass, when the word reached the various black communities that the Civil War was over and that freedom was at hand, spontaneous celebrations broke out. These spontaneous celebrations happening throughout the month of June have now been coined as Juneteenth African Freedom Day celebrations. And so today marks the 105th such celebration that has been going on since 1865 when the Civil War was won. It also marks this very day, June 22nd, 1868, the largest and most organized Freedom Day celebration happening here in the city of St. Louis 150 years ago this very day. And so then we gather to recognize what was then called the Freedmen's Fair that took place at Washington and 4th Street. What was located then was called the Philharmonic Hall, where African Americans throughout the region came together in a great celebration for freedom here in the city of St. Louis. This celebration, they said, had exhibitions, they had lectures, they sold crafts and food so that they could raise money to build schools for black youth. It was a great and grand fair. They said huge numbers of crowds came out, located right there at Washington and 4th Street in 1868. A number of African Americans from the city of St. Louis helped organize that, as well as from Kirkwood, the area that is now Kirkwood, and Carondelet. Now that's when Carondelet at that time was not a full part of the city of St. Louis. And so talk about regionally working together. They worked together and held this great exhibition. They had lectures, they had music, they had dancing, they had food, they had discussions, they had items available, they had booths where people could learn about where they can find a home, how they could move further north, how they can take care of their families. All of these educational activities were involved for those who participated. They called it, as I said again, the Freedmen's Fair. Many are not aware that the Civil War, over 250,000 African American women and men fought in that Civil War, having some 200 black regiments. One of the most notable and the first one to engage the Confederate forces happened right here in the state of Missouri at a battle they called the Battle of Island Mound that took place in Bates, Missouri. There, 240 African American women and men fought some 600 Confederate guerrillas that were going back and forth from Missouri to the Kansas border. These African Americans grabbed and seized a Confederate stronghold, which was called the Enoch John Toothman homestead. They took that and made it their fort and called it Fort Africa, because they were determined to be free and to put forward their self-determination. And so then, Juneteenth African Freedom Days is a celebration of the ending of chattel slavery in the United States, and is a continuous celebration since that time, and at this point, one of the oldest African American celebrations in the United States. And so then we gather here on this day marking the 150th anniversary of the most major Juneteenth celebration here in the city of St. Louis on this very day of June 22nd. It is a great legacy that we salute and celebrate here this day. Now, Juneteenth, African Freedom Days, is not just a celebration for African Americans, it is a celebration for all of America. Frederick Douglass taught us is that any time that you put a chain on one person, the other side of that chain is on you. That means you must think restrictive. You must act in hateful ways. You must live in ways that cause oppression. And that just does not lend itself to the person that you have the chain on. It will also spill over into your family with your children and how you may treat your spouse and the rest. So it is not just pigeonholed to those that you have captured. And so the lesson there is that the ending of slavery in America helps everybody and has made America a much better and more humane place to live. In St. Louis in 1846, a man by the name of Moses Dixon created the Knights of Liberty and the Daughters of Tabor. They organized 47,000 African Americans for the largest abolitionist organization in the country. They secretly organized themselves and trained themselves for what they thought was the impending war. They trained themselves in military tactics. They trained themselves in first aid and how to handle war. And finally, when the Civil War took place, and in 1862, when they allowed African Americans to join the armed forces, 47,000 African Americans already trained were ready to fight this war and win on our behalf. What a great legacy. That organization was founded right here in St. Louis at 7th and Lucas. It's right behind what is now the Convention Center and the old Dillard store. Right there it was formed, the largest. Moses Dixon then, with other African Americans, went to found Lincoln University and to fight for public education for black students in the city of St. Louis. He and Charles Tandy, we know Charles Tandy from across from Sumner High School, as well as Milton Turner, came together to get the first black principal in the city of St. Louis. That principal was Charles Turner. Charles Cole, where Cole School at Enright and Vandeventer is named after. And so one person connects to another, which makes a difference in the lives of people and has improved not only the United States, but specifically how we live here in the city of St. Louis. And so we come today in this tradition that they did, like they did on June 22nd of 1868, to celebrate the Freedom Days. And as they did then, one of the things they also did at that great exhibition was to sell pictures of abolitionists, because they were trying to raise money. So they had pictures of Frederick Douglass and of Nat Turner. They had pictures of John Brown and other abolitionists who had fought for freedom. They said the pictures were very popular. Everybody was trying to get one. It was the fad of that fair. And they used those monies, as I said, to try to build black schools in the city of St. Louis, Kirkwood, and in Carondelet. And they also recognized those who had contributed to the war effort in freeing African Americans. And so in that tradition, we gather 150 years later, and we cannot say that we were there, but 150 years later, we gather in that same manner to salute 6 individuals here in the city of St. Louis that we consider to be significant contributors. Some are what we call our liberators, some are cultural propagators, some are cultural restorers, some are cultural archivers, all here today in recognition of Juneteenth. And so we have several resolutions we'd like for them to come forward as we call their names and join us here at the podium. I'd first like to start. We'll get it together here, yeah. Ms. Connolly, can you come forward? Many of you may know the Griot Museum of African History and Culture. She is the founder and the organizer. We consider her to be one of the cultural archivers. These cultural archivers were also recognized 150 years ago during the Great Freedmen's Fair here in the city of St. Louis. And so then we bring her up today to recognize her work on archiving the history of African Americans in the city of St. Louis, thus expanding all of our understandings of the history of the city of St. Louis. We have this resolution here today for Ms. Lois Connolly for her work with the Griot Museum here in the city of St. Louis. We thank her. We'd like to also call up one of our cultural propagators. This individual, we talked about the significance and the connection, the river that is between us and the east side. You can view it as a blockade or you can see it as a connector. And so we see it as a connector. We'd like to recognize an internationally known poet and writer that resides right here in our area. Oftentimes when we talk about regionalism, we forget about East St. Louis. That's part of the region. We forget about Kinloch, and we forget about all those other black communities that are part of this entire region. And so we thought we'd reach across the river today to salute one of our cultural propagators, as they did 150 years ago on this very day. We'd like to recognize Mr. Eugene Redmond from East St. Louis, renowned poet and writer and educator. We did not ask him to do any of his poetry here today, but we did want to recognize him during Juneteenth. You would just hold on to that. We have to give you the right one. Where would we be without those who have made a commitment to continue to push for the ending of oppression and justice? And so then we'd like to recognize those individuals, our liberators, as they did 150 years ago on June 22nd. This particular individual has worked in many what people consider to be today activist campaigns, has also worked with the incarcerated population here in the city of St. Louis, helping to ensure that they have a smooth transition and can leave the life of crime and become good parts of our community. This individual we've heard before is Mr. Anthony Shaheed. We'd like to recognize him during this Juneteenth celebration, African Freedom Days, to thank him for his work on behalf of this community. I would mention that we also have a resolution from Mr. Norman Say. He was not well enough to be here today, but his name goes without saying, but we will say it anyway. Mr. Norman Say was very involved in the civil rights movement here in the city of St. Louis, and we would not be various places able to eat at Woolworths or to be able to stand up at the various stores today if it had not been for the work of people like individuals like Norman Say. So we give salute to him today during this time. We'd also like to recognize Ms. Safia Chauvin, who was the director of the African Heritage Dancers and Drummers Youth Group. She's considered one of our cultural propagators and archivers. She has worked with youth, teaching them African dance and culture and values for decades. And so often her work is not recognized, so we want to be sure to do so this Juneteenth. Believe it or not, many of her students work for the city today. One is an attorney and was very significant in prosecuting things for the city of St. Louis. We didn't ask him to come and do any drumming today, but we wanted you to know that Safia Chauvin has done great work on behalf of this community. Our other person, we can give her a hand. As they did 150 years ago in recognizing some of our community liberators, we do so here again with individuals whose name is renowned throughout the city of St. Louis. He's known for getting in front of things and chaining himself to stuff. He's known for standing up for truth and making sure that the cause of African American justice and the ending of exploitation and discrimination happens here in the city of St. Louis and nationally. He's an individual, he's an elder today, but he continues to propagate his knowledge to future generations and continues to be a part of the fabric of this community, helping to continue to address issues of disenfranchisement. Now, I'm going to say it this way. I was told by Percy Green III to make sure that I introduce his father as Percy Green II, who we honor here today. We ask that he comes forward and receives his resolution.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In that
It is our honor on behalf of this Board of Aldermen to present each of you with your resolutions here today, recognizing your significant contribution to this entire region. We want the world to know that we appreciate what you have brought for the city of St. Louis and for the United States in general. If it had not been for your work, sweat, and tears, if it had not been for your sacrifice, where would we be today? And so then we want everyone to know that we appreciate it, and simply giving you a piece of paper does not recognize all that you have done, but we got to start somewhere, and we do it with this paper, knowing that this resolution is just a token of our appreciation for your work on behalf of this city and behalf of the citizens of this country and African people throughout the world. We appreciate you and thank you for your contribution. Would you have the word?
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I just rise in awe and to thank each and every one of the individuals standing up there. I've worked with all of them mostly at one occasion or another. One of the things that happens in any generational is you pass things down. When I look at, I'm going to start with Percy Green and Norman Say. They have passed down to some of the generation that's standing up there the will to fight intolerance, injustice, any place and everywhere. And that has affected me all of my life. I didn't grow up here in St. Louis, but the minute that I got here, some of the first names I ever heard of was Percy Green and Mr. Norman Say. They were sometimes almost synonymous. And we had another person down here at the board, Bill Clay. I also use them for my personal resources when I need to call people and talk to them, because I've been known to be a wee little bit of a hellraiser. I want to thank you all for giving me that, because what happens when I call them, they tell me to stand up and keep doing it. They never tell me, oh, Sharon, don't do it. They say, keep doing that and do more, because we have to have different kinds of people doing different things within the system and outside the system. I want to thank you for your guidance and for your perseverance and for your leadership. Brother Shaheed, no matter if we're on the same side or a different side, we're on the same side, okay? He tells people that I'm the female version of him. I like to think that he's the male version of me, okay? But whatever it is, once we met, we became fast friends. We don't have to agree. We can agree to disagree, but we always have respect and love for one another's position, and that's how you really learn how to deal in society, when you can agree to disagree without being disagreeable.
Thank you.
Dr. Conley, I love your museum. You don't know, every time I go by there, I want to go in there. In fact, I was getting ready to call you, so before you leave here today, I got some things that I might want to donate if you're interested in. So I just think what you've done is wonderful. I've been to it before when you first opened it. Anything I could do to help, we need that. A lot of times our history gets lost, things that people don't know about. I was listening the other day about one of the young stars. I'm not going to say their names. And they were, somebody's very well known, and they just don't know our history. And it was something about our history that was on TV, and they came out and said, well, I didn't know that. You help to make sure that our history is passed on. African American history has often been oral. So to actually be able to have physical things and to be and go and touch that, that's something that not only you should be pushing, but we should be helping you financially through the city. As you can see, when you look around here, you don't see us reflected. So sometimes I need to go to places like that to remember that we are part of the St. Louis history, and that we've been a deep part of the St. Louis history, so I thank you. The sister with the hats, that's what I'm gonna call her, okay? What I love about her, and I've talked to her all the time, is that in any organization, there are always females that do not get the recognition that they are supposed to, okay? So I am thankful that you are there in the midst of things, making sure that black women are represented and that our viewpoint is represented. And so although we have some of the common issues with black men, sometimes they're a little bit different. And we need people such as yourself to make sure that our point is represented. And I appreciate you and I thank you. And then to go over to Illinois, and Mr. Eugene Redmond, I've seen you around for years. I actually am from Illinois. I grew up in Decatur, Illinois. But still, when I go across the riverfront, there's that little pull. As soon as I get over there, I'm like, and I've been in St. Louis for 40-something years now, but that's still that pull, that love of where I came from, okay? I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work you do. All of you all deserve much more. If I was very wealthy, I would start foundations in each of your name and to help you with anything that I could. But short of that, if there's anything I could do for any of you, I would always be glad to do it. Thank you so much. Thank you for setting an example for me. I hope to one day be able to pass that example on to another generation. Thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Much respect.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 19th.
I know. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. First of all, I wanted to ask your forgiveness because I don't feel well today, and I didn't want to give my germs to everybody, so I'm staying over here in my little space. But I wanted to most especially say thank you to the group that is being recognized today, because all of them have affected my life in many, many great ways, and most especially my children's lives, because I know you were there. You were there for my children, and it made a difference in their lives, most especially when you're, and a lot of people don't understand the importance of making sure that you raise a man to be prepared to move forward on this earth. And you all gave them everything that they needed to understand who they were, where they came from, and most especially to appreciate their culture. Even to this day, they are still honoring all that you gave them. And I just thank you so much for that. Mr. Redmond, my sister, was a part of the poetry movement here. You all mentored her. My youngest son, when you were working with Catherine Dunham, he was over there too. Sophia, all those Saturdays that you all made sure my children were okay. Percy Green, they thought you were a superhero. It was so funny. But they just looked at you all in a different way. I mean, it's just, they didn't get a chance to know Anthony like I know Anthony. You know, that's my secret brother from another mother that's got an issue. But it's okay. But it's okay. And Lois, you know, I knew your daughter Erica, and I watched you with her, and you did something that all those big corporate people and all them fancy folks who thought they knew what they were doing didn't do and didn't finish when they talked about they were going to have an African American museum. All the talk, they never did anything, but you did. Yes, you did. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and most especially, you know, Norman Say lives in my ward, and I watch out after him all the time because I need to know he's okay. And when I talked to him the other night, he just said, I want to come, but I can't. And he did say thank you to the body for honoring him. Thank you.
Mr. President, members of the board, we have had the lady with the hat join us here up on the podium, as the Alderwoman said. Ms. Safia Chauvin, she was the originator, the director of the African Heritage Dancers and Drummers Youth Group. And each Saturday, as the Alderwoman from the 19th said, she would be there with her youth with music and teaching them African dance, but more so teaching them culture and community-based values, how to treat somebody right, how to speak to your elders, how to work and clean the community, how to feel good about yourself. The music and the dance and the drumming was a way to get to those more important points, which is a tradition. She herself brought it with both poise and elegance in teaching them. But that poise and elegance was backed up with a strength and a power with a woman with the hats. And so then we recognize her, as we did all others, on this 150th anniversary of the major Juneteenth celebration here in the city of St. Louis that happened back in 1868. We recognize her as one of our community cultural propagators, Ms. Safia Chauvin. It is our honor to recognize each one of them, and as the Alderwoman from the first said, that doesn't mean we agree with everything that they do or say. but we must recognize their contribution to this community regardless of those disagreements. Before the Civil War happened, the single thing on the mind of our community was to free itself from chattel slavery. After it ended, we had to decide, what do we do? Do we stay here in America? Do we try to liberate some states in the South? Do we build our own independent, self-determining communities? What exactly do we do? And so each one of these individuals here represents the different approaches that was decided upon by various portions of our community. But the one thing that we're all united around, and that is the ending of discrimination, of our right to have cultural self-determination, and for us to be able to stand up in the world as all other people do, with dignity, with grace, and with respect. And so for that, we salute each of our honorees here this day. We thank you for your work.
I want to just take a moment and thank each and every one of you for all your works and everything that you've done to progress equality in the city of St. Louis. It obviously has not been an easy job, and we have made some progress, but we've made that progress because of you, not in spite of you. That progress was made because you were willing to go out and take the tough stance and push the envelope and hold people accountable. And those are the things that softened the ground, that allow changes to be made in our city, so that now we have a cutting-edge minority inclusion plan finally on the books in the city of St. Louis. It's not just a mayor's executive order, but it's actually a law. That came because of it. We take a look at the fact that we wanted all sorts of inclusion plans and equality things addressed here in the city of St. Louis. And that came because of you, not in spite of you. So as a father of four, I just want to thank you for all your works. I want to make sure that you're duly recognized. And as it was said earlier, as African Americans just going through our daily lives, we're being written out of history. History has been being written against us, so that when people pull the Post-Dispatch and some of these articles and they say, okay, what was Brother Shaheed about? What was the Black History Museum about? What were some of these things? Why were these things important? Now, the official record will show in the history books of the city of St. Louis that on this day we take a moment to properly codify your history within the permanent records of the city of St. Louis in an official capacity. And it's not like Wikipedia where anybody can go change and edit it. It's real and it will stand, and the only way it can be changed is by having another elected official take it up and change it, so that now your history is properly documented, so that when they read about the Renaissance and the rebirth of our city, they will be able to go to one record and get the true history and understand that your contributions were meaningful and it made a difference and it set this city on a different trajectory. So I want to thank you on behalf of the members of the Board of Aldermen, my family and friends, and people who are benefiting today for your work. Let's give them a big round of applause and thank you.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. With that, we'll return to our regular order of business. Report of city officials.
We have nothing further.
We dispense with line item number 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We will dispense with line items 8 through 10, first reading of board bills.
Board Bill Number 88, sponsored by Alderwoman Middlebrook, an ordinance approving the petition to establish the Gateway Land Community Improvement District, establishing the Gateway Land and Community Improvement District, and finding a public purpose for the establishment of the Gateway Land Community Improvement District. Board Bill Number 89, sponsored by Alderwoman Middlebrook, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a cooperation agreement with Discovery PIER Land Holdings, LLC, authorizing reimbursement in accordance therewith and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 90, sponsored by Alderman Coatar, an ordinance amending Ordinance Number 69146 and 69153, authorizing other related actions and containing a severability clause. Board Bill Number 91, sponsored by Alderwoman Navarro and Alderman Williamson, an ordinance approved and recommended by the Preservation Board and Planning Commission of the City of St. Louis pertaining to the Skinker DeBaliviere-Catlin Tract-Parkview Historic District, amending Ordinance Number 57688, repealing and replacing certain standards for the Skinker DeBaliviere-Catlin Tract-Parkview Historic District as set forth herein. Board Bill Number 92, sponsored by Alderwoman Navarro, an ordinance adopted pursuant to Sections 70.210 and 70.325 of the revised statutes of Missouri, authorizing and directing the city, a constitutional charter city of the state of Missouri, by and through its Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, to execute and deliver an intergovernmental cooperation agreement by and among the city and the Art Museum Subdistrict of the Metropolitan Zoological Park and the Museum District of the city, a political subdivision of the state of Missouri. That's the extent of the first reading of board bills.
Reference to committee.
To the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill Number 88 and 89. To the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 91. To HUD's, Board Bill Number 90. To the Parks Committee, Board Bill Number 92. That's the extent of reference to committee.
Second reading.
From the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 53 CS, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Building Code with amendments, including Appendixes E, F, G, H, I, and J, repealing Ordinance 68610, Ordinance 68788, and Ordinance 69271, and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. From the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 56, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Existing Building Code with amendments, including Appendices A, B, and C, repealing Ordinance 68790 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. From the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 57 CS, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code with amendments, repealing Ordinance 68791 and containing a penalty, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause.
Have some order. Please proceed.
From the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 62, sponsored by Alderwoman Navarro, an ordinance repealing Ordinance 70026, and in lieu thereof enacting a new ordinance prohibiting the issuance of any 3 a.m. closing permits for any currently non-3 a.m. licensed premises within the boundaries of the 28th Ward Liquor Control District, and containing an emergency clause. From the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill Number 32, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, an ordinance concerning certain business license regulations set forth in Title 8, which require the completion of a plat and neighborhood consent petition prior to obtaining an occupancy permit, repealing ordinances 56788, 57294, and 58645 pertaining to arcades containing a severability clause and an effective date clause. From the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill Number 1 as amended, sponsored by Alderman Williamson and President Reed, the budget for the fiscal year. From the Public Employees Committee, Board Bill Number 68 as amended, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the city and all employees under the classified service, including a compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, and authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing Ordinance 7285, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, and including an emergency clause. That's the extent of second reading of board bills.
We will dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill Number 74, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, establishing and authorizing a public works and improvement program at St. Louis Lambert International Airport entitled FY19 Project List and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 75, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Comptroller, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making certain findings with respect to the transfer of up to $3 million of excess monies that the city intends to transfer from the Debt Service Stabilization Fund to the Airport Development Fund, authorizing a transfer in an amount not to exceed $3 million from the DSSF into the Airport Development Fund for the purpose of making funds available to address Coldwater Creek Emergency Repairs Phase 2, installation of two 12-foot by 12-foot reinforced concrete box culverts, and the restoration of the Charlie Pad aircraft ramp, glycol recovery system, ramp edge lighting system, and associated impact improvements, containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 64, sponsored by Alderman Williamson and President Reed, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax imposed pursuant to Section 94.660, as adopted and approved by the voters on August 2nd, 1994, pursuant to Ordinance 63168, creating the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, directing the Treasurer to deposit funds pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, Account 1, appropriating $11,560,000 from the said sales tax for the period herein stated to the Bi-State Development Agency and containing a severability clause. Board Bill Number 65, sponsored by Alderman Williamson and President Reed, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax, directing the Treasurer to deposit funds received pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Fund, Account 2, appropriating $11,560,000 from the said sales tax from the period herein stated to the Bi-State Development Agency and containing a severability clause.
Madam Clerk, that was Board Bill 66. That last one, just make that correction. That was Board Bill 66 instead of 65.
Okay.
All right,
Board
please
Bill
continue.
66.
Yeah, please continue on Board Bill 77.
Okay. Board Bill 77, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing a supplemental appropriation, amending Ordinance 7540, commonly referred to as the City of St. Louis Annual Operating Plan for fiscal year 2017 to 2018, appropriating and setting apart projected local use tax and gaming fund revenues to address certain shortfalls in revenues and excess expenditures in the general fund for the current fiscal year in the amount of $3,200,000 as hereinafter detailed and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 70, sponsored by Alderwoman Navarro, an ordinance approved and recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and the Board of Public Service, authorizing a First Amendment of the lease agreement authorized by Ordinance 63956 between the City and the Municipal Theater Association of St. Louis by amending Section 2, Section 4, Other Consideration, Forest Park Improvements, and Exhibit C with an emergency provision. Board Bill Number 76, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission, approving the name of a new public street located in the approved Jonas Hubbard Estate subdivision located in City Block 552. Board Bill Number 86, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, pursuant to Ordinance 68937, an ordinance authorizing the honorary street name Urban League Square, which shall begin at the intersection of North Spring Avenue and Grandel Square and run east on Grandel Square to North Grand Boulevard. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 26th and the Alderman from the 13th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will dispense with line item 16, Third reading consent.
Board Bill Number 48, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property on the Central West End form-based district map from NG1, Neighborhood General Type 1 zone, to the NCT1, Neighborhood Center Type 1 zone in City Block 3914, and to further change the overall boundaries of the NG1 Neighborhood General Type 1 zone and the NC1 Neighborhood Center Type 1 zone established under Ordinance 69406 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 50, sponsored by Alderwoman Martin, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property in City Block 2861 from B2 Family District to the F Neighborhood Commercial District at 5601 to 03 South Broadway and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 71, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro, an ordinance establishing a three-way stop site at the intersection of Pernod and Tedmar, regulating all traffic traveling eastbound and westbound on Pernod at Tedmar and regulating all traffic southbound on Tedmar at Pernod and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of the third reading consent calendar.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the third reading consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the third reading consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th. Entertain a second on the motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coatar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed. I have to go back. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderman Gunther. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Rhodey. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderwoman Boyd. You have 22 aye votes and 0 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 18th and third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading, report of engrossments.
We have none.
Report of enrollment.
Board Bill Numbers 48, 50, and 71.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. First reading of resolutions.
Resolution number 71, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen Rice, Bosley, Ingracia, Gunther, Green, Spencer, Navarro, Davis, Coatar, Martin, Cone, Williamson, Kennedy, Murphy, Howard, and President Reed. The Board of Aldermen stand alongside our immigrant neighbors and residents and oppose the practice of family separation and the detention of children, and oppose the use of Missouri taxpayer dollars to fund this practice. We call on our leaders in Washington, D.C., including Senator Roy Blunt, Senator Claire McCaskill, and Congressman Lacey Clay, to oppose this practice.
Alderman from the 8th, you recognized on the first reading of resolution number 71.
Thank you, Mr. President. If this is the appropriate time to speak on the bill, or you want to make a motion first?
You can request unanimous consent.
I would like to request unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you so much. This is an important gesture, I believe, to our immigrant population here in the city of St. Louis and in our region, especially recognizing that we are celebrating both Immigrant Heritage Month and Juneteenth. We as the United States have a long history of detention, of family separation, of policies that harm particularly people of color. I mean, this latest practice from the federal government is far extreme of what we believe are humane practices. And so I am grateful for the support of all of my colleagues here to stand with our population to whom we owe so much of our progress here in the city of St. Louis. To stand with them and say, we see you, we are with you, we are going to oppose the inhumanity that is taking place from our federal government on down, and we would like strongly to request that if the sending of our National Guard troops was largely symbolic by Governor Greitens, then it would be hugely symbolic of Governor Parson to bring our Missouri National Guard troops back to show that we will not be a part of this sort of inhumanity at the border. So I thank you so much. We have an immense history and heritage here in St. Louis, and this is a furthering of that. Thank you for recognizing immigrants and their humanity just because they are in fact human. Again, I thank you so much for your support. So.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 8th, would you like to make the motion for adoption of Resolution 71?
Sorry, can...
Alderman from the 15th, you recognize on the discussion of the resolution, but Alderman from the 8th, you've requested unanimous consent. Now you want to make a motion for the adoption, and then we'll continue discussion.
Okay, I would like to move to adopt Resolution 71.
Moved by the Alderman from the 8th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Alderman from the 15th.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we pass it in bank.
It's been made, a motion's been made to adopt Resolution 71 in bank. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 15th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any objections? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. It's been moved, and it's been moved by the Alderman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th, that we now adopt the newly in-banked Resolution 71. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 72, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, pursuant to Ordinance 69372, the Parks and Environmental Matters Committee does hereby approve the recommendations of the Director for the appropriation of Neighborhood Parks Capital Improvement Accounts funds for the fiscal year 2019 regarding the proceeds of the 3/16 tax.
Alderman from the 10th, you recognize on the first reading of Resolution number 72.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request that we take Resolution 72 and assign it to the Parks Committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th, that we assign Resolution 72 to the Parks Committee. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please assign resolution number 10 to
Number 72.
72
I'm number
to
10.
resolution 72 to Parks. Yeah, resolution 73 now.
Resolution 73, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, pursuant to Ordinance 64994, the Parks and Environmental Matters Committee does hereby approve the recommendations of the Director for the appropriation of Neighborhood Parks Capital Improvements Fund account fund for the fiscal year 2019 regarding the proceeds of the 1/10 cent tax.
Alderman from the 10th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution 73.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I request that resolution 73 be assigned to the Parks Committee.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 10th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please assign resolution 73 to Parks.
So noted. Resolution number 74, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, pursuant to Ordinance 67477, the Parks and Environmental Matters Committee does hereby approve the recommendations of the Director for the appropriation of Neighborhood Parks Capital Improvements Account Fund for the fiscal year 2019.
Alderman from the 10th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution number 74.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, resolution number 74. I can't just say ditto. Please assign resolution 74 to the Parks Committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 10th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please sign resolution 74 to Parks.
So noted.
Second reading.
That's the extent of second reading of...
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Tuesday, June 26th, public safety meeting at 10 a.m. Wednesday, June 27th, HUD's meeting at 9 a.m. And Friday, June 29th, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That's the extent of my announcement.
Alderman from the 6th.
I would like to welcome everyone to come to Tower Grove Pride this Saturday from 11 to 8 at Arsenal and Grand. We'll have food, drinks, and a bunch of booths set up, and we'd love to host you in the original location for St. Louis City Pride.
Excellent. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'm sorry I'm tardy with this. I wanted to do special guests, but so much was going on this morning. So I would like to introduce my special guest, Ollie Stewart, who was the 6th Ward Committee woman and also runs a fantastic organization, the Southside Senior Citizen, and also Sheila Jones, who is with Amron UE and is Customer Relationship Manager. And if I could just take another, because I was not here after the Bring It Together event that happened right after the Memorial Day weekend. I want to tell you how great it was. I invited people to come and be celebrity waitresses and waiters. We had a great turnout. Actually, Maurice came there, but I want to kind of give a shout out. I hate to do this because it's making the 1st ward look bad, but the 26th ward turned up in full force. The city treasurer, Tashar Jones, the comptroller, Darlene Green, the 26th Ward Alderman, Frank Williamson, the state rep and 26th Ward committee woman, Carla May, the 26th Ward committee man, Joe Palm. Every person who was an elected official in the 26th Ward showed up. Also who came was Jesse Tobb, the 18th Ward committee man, Greg Daly came, our collective revenue, the 4th Ward Committee woman and the former 4th Ward Committee man, Ed McFarland and Ms. Evans. Rasheen Aldrich from the 5th Ward is the committee man of the 5th Ward. Alderman Collins Muhammad was supposed to come, but he had a funeral, so was Chris Carter Sr. They had funerals. And then some people came, Joanne Williams and Mary Wheeler. Joanne Williams used to be with the Carpenter, and Mary Wheeler used to be the Democratic director. And then what I was so impressed with is that Lakeisha Bosley, I want you to hear this, Alderman Bosley. Your sister showed up and showed out. She worked so hard. She and Mr. Sharp, who I didn't invite, T. Sharp, came, and these young people worked so much that they made Alderman Muhammad jealous. So he was on the, I was on their little email and Facebook, and he's like, I was supposed to be there. And they already volunteered to come back next year. The
That's
seniors
awesome.
were so happy because usually they have to stand in line and wait long times. So we were their servers, and 600 to 800 seniors were there. And Ollie Stewart does such a great job, and it was such an honor for me to be one of the servers. But I want to thank all of the people that came out, especially the young. Like I said, I think she may be running for the 3rd Ward Alderwoman in a few years, because she was, if she doesn't become the state rep, I'm going to help her, okay? She's been my baby for a long time anyway. But they were great. T-Sharp, I didn't know where he'd found out about it, but he showed up and he was there working hard. I appreciate everyone who showed up, because the seniors in our community are so important, and it's important that we show them that we want to serve them and not just have us vote. So thanks to everyone who did anything to help this project. Thank you.
All right. And thank you, Alderwoman, for the idea of the celebrity waiter, because that is a tremendous idea, and it really has elevated the entire event. So thank you, Alderwoman, from the first, for what you've done to change the dynamics of the event altogether. Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to also make an announcement that this weekend is the Pride Festival, and it celebrates and commemorates the beginning of the LGBT Pride movement, LGBTQIAA movement, which began in full force at the Stonewall riots in New York City. In St. Louis, we have a number of events that take place over the weekend. A number of them are downtown. There's also the Tower Grove Pride event that's taking place this weekend as well. The large parade that everyone's come to be familiar with is happening downtown on Market on Sunday. So I invite all of you to attend. Obviously the focus is LGBTQIA Pride, but there's a lot of intersectionality in our identities, and we as a community identify with the struggle for freedom and the struggle from oppression, and so really it's a difficult time for a lot of us in the LGBTQIA community, as it is for many of us as Americans today, witnessing the atrocities that are being affronted to our fellow humans. And so now is, it's always a time to celebrate the milestones that we've made as a community, but now more than ever, it's also time to take action. And so, the Pride Festival, while it celebrates the milestones and accomplishments that we've made, it's also a call to action to make sure that we're continuing to face, the threats that are, that we're facing as a community and as a society. So I implore anyone that is opening their hearts and minds to change to attend the event. This weekend, there's lots of organizations that support the LGBTQIA community, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alderman from the 25th. Alderman from the 18th, recognized on the motion to excuse.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that we excuse the Alderman from the 2nd, 17th, 22nd, and 27th for necessary absence.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board adjourns until Friday, June 29th, 2018.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th and the 25th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned.